Hello and welcome to On a Mission, the show where we share inspiring conversations with phenomenal women who are creating success and prosperity in their lives with purpose and passion. I'm Pauline Rohdich, a success mindset coach and clinical hypnotherapist, and I'm on a personal mission to remind you that you are a beautiful soul and you have so much potential. And my intention for this show is to give you the nudge to answer your own calling and to rise up and take on your life's mission. So hello again, everyone, and welcome to this episode of On a Mission. And today I'm joined by the amazing, phenomenal Rachel Gotto. So Rachel Gotto is a clinical hypnotherapist, just like I am. We train with the same teacher, and that's how we came to meet one another several years ago. But I'm really thrilled to have Rachel on the show today because she really is an amazing lady. Her memoir is going to be released later this year. She'll tell us a little bit about that too. But for today, I just want to say welcome, Rachel. I'm delighted that you're on this episode of On a Mission. How are you doing?
I'm well, Pauline. Lovely to see you.
And just for the record, we're in the middle of a major heat wave here in Ireland. So my normal body temperature is quite high. So I certainly do believe I'll be fanning myself and possibly mopping the brow along this particular episode, because by God, this is like an oven where I am currently, despite open doors, etc. So Rachel, this show, as you know, is all about sharing, your purpose and your mission, and a little bit about the background as to how you got there. So would you love to share with everybody, our listeners, what you're up to now and what led you to doing what you're now doing?
Yeah, sure. Well, as you know, we're both clinical hypnotherapists and we both trained in London with the same teacher. And the reason why I ended up doing that, incidentally, was because I have a phenomenal life story behind me, and that's hence the Flying on the Inside, which is my memoir coming out in December. And at one point in time, I was stuck in my bed. I woke from a lot of neurosurgery to find actually that I couldn't move my body at all. And it was the result of the benign brain tumor being found and resulting surgery. Now, I had budgeted for many things in my life, but I had not budgeted for the fact that I wouldn't be able to move my body again. And it was a huge journey, a huge learning to actually move my body again. I was told I'd never walk again. I was left-handed. I had to become right-handed. It's a very long story, but basically in a nutshell, it was neuroplasticity that got me walking again. It was neuroplasticity that gave me my mind back in another story. And there were times in my life when I had to stare at my limbs to make them work again, literally just staring at a dead limb. But over a period of time, I started to move again. And that's really the first kernel of starting my journey to actually becoming a clinical hypnotherapist and coach, because I quickly worked out that actually I'd harnessed the power of my mind to use my body again. And at another point in time, I actually had to recover from prescription drug addiction. And it was the power of my thoughts that actually helped me to stay alive, believe it or not. I was in a very, very difficult position. So that is really how I started my journey to become a clinical hypnotherapist, because as hypnotherapists, we harness the power of the mind. And this is where it all began.
It's an incredible story, Rachel, and I genuinely look forward to reading your book. And I absolutely love the title of your book, Flying on the Inside. I mean, it's really spectacular. So I know it's going to be a fascinating story for all who read it. But, I'm just curious to know, though, when you were actually, being helped in the recovery and working with, we'll say, physio, etc., were they actually bringing in, was there anybody talking to you about the power of your mind as a matter of interest?
Absolutely not. And in fact, it was something that was basically left fallow and left to me. There was, actually, we're only talking about 12, 13 years ago. We're not talking that long ago, but it was more about the physicality of recovery than actually taking care of my mind. And I remember actually reading recently in a diary entry that I made at the time of actually recovering from drug addiction. And I'd written something like, I need to be careful about what I say and think to myself, because my cells are listening. And somehow I clumsily stumbled upon the fact that actually what we visualize and what we think about has a corresponding effect physically and emotionally. But through all that time, actually, interestingly, unfortunately, it was stated that I had a psychological underlying disorder. And I actually knew that I was coming off drugs. I knew there was withdrawal syndrome. So the discipline it took for me to actually not listen to what could have been decided or diagnosed, and to just harness my mind to say, this is a journey and this is a journey out and only I can make it. I had to be very disciplined about what I thought and what I visualized, because I knew it was the difference between life and death for me at that point in time. So no, I never really came across that. It's only now I think that this sort of whole, you know, neuroplasticity has become a buzzword, and it's becoming very powerful, which is great. And a lot of medical professions do refer to people like you and I, you know.
But you know something, listening to you, it just really emphasizes something that I love to share with people. And it's a Steve Jobs quote, that we can't ever join the dots looking forward. We can only join the dots looking backwards. And as you're reflecting and contemplating on that journey, isn't it so incredible how you had those insights? The unconscious competent was alive and well. And you know, I mean, we don't know what we don't know until we know it. And it's obviously now you can understand, wow, okay, so this came upon your path. But would you accept that this has all happened for you to allow you to coach as you do, to be that incredible clinical hypnotherapist as you are, and that you're actually helping people similarly?
Absolutely. And I'm so grateful. I can only say, I wouldn't have said this 10 years ago. I wouldn't have said this 15 years ago when I was in it. But now every single ounce of what I've had to go through, and it is phenomenal, has only served me in what I do today, only serves me. And I am so proud that I'm able to stand in front of people and say, listen, this is my journey, but your journey can also be as phenomenal in its transition and its recovery, because anything is actually possible. And that's my whole thrust.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm completely with you. I mean, I'm excited for you, because I know that you're speaking, you know, from such a place of integrity and from your heart. And I mean, it was a serious, I mean, am I correct in saying, Rachel, would it have been at some point in your life, did you experience a near-death experience? Or am I completely off? Was that something else that you were
I did have a near-death experience. And funny enough, I didn't even know it was a near-death experience. Such was my life at the time. I was just so busy recovering and overcoming many different traumas. It was only when I wrote my memoir that actually I figured, oh my goodness, that was a near-death experience. And I won't share it in detail because I don't want to spoil the story. But yes, I did have a near-death experience. And interestingly, you know, there was a point in time when I was dying and I was unconscious according to medical, the medical field, but actually I became so acutely aware of myself and my position in time and where I was, that that has stayed with me so very long. Now, I don't want to get into talking about death, but actually it is very interesting to have some kind of a little bit of an insight into where we're at, what happens when we do start to lose our energy and our life force. And it has served a lot of comfort to me. I haven't had the Anita Moorjani experience at all, nothing remotely similar, but I never felt threatened once. And I think that that is a lovely thing to be able to share, that I never felt that I was isolated or alone or, you know, left in some way in this dark place. It wasn't anything like that.
Well, it is wonderful to have that kind of comfort blanket of, you know, where you're going ultimately. And the rest of us just have to trust that it is going to be equally beautiful for us. And hopefully.
And me, because yeah, but and me, because I forget, you know, we are humans, we forget these experiences, you know, they don't stay with us every day.
Well, listen, hopefully it's a long way off for many of us, okay, and those listening as well. So in terms of, you know, just the general kind of chat that we tend to have on this show, what would have been the biggest decision you've ever had to make, Rachel? I know you've had to make many, but can you, if there was one, what would it be?
I think the biggest decision I had to make, I have had a lot, as you know, a lot of very big decisions. It was actually the decision to continue to live again in freedom. I didn't know that I had a lot of survivor's guilt. And again, all of these subconscious programs run within us, and we're often not really aware of them. But I knew that I was carrying a blanket around with me at some point. It was a dark blanket, and it clouded my life. And it took me quite a long time to work out. It was actually survivor's guilt. And that was a break in loyalty to two people who had tragically died very close to me. One was my husband and one was my brother. My brother and I survived a childhood together. And of course, my husband came along just very shortly after my brother died. So living in this beautiful life, but knowing that the people I loved had gone before me was really distressing and difficult. And I think the biggest decision and the bravest decision I've ever made is actually to honor their passing and their lives by choosing to live most fully. And choosing to live most fully was difficult. That meant that I had to change all my patterns and change everything that I had learned and known to be true, and to honor them in a different way. So that was cellular for me. And I think that was my biggest decision.
And, you know, Rachel, oh gosh, I can only imagine to lose two loved ones so close must have been extremely difficult for you. But, you know, that's the measure of who you are. And that's why you're able to make such an impact in the world. But just, you know, just bridge it for me. When you started to recover, I mean, did you go back to work? And what kind of work had you been doing previously prior to your illness?
Okay, that's an interesting one. I was an entrepreneur at the age of 23. By 23, I had a restaurant, I had a shop and 3 apartments. So I was a bit of a goer. So
about you, wow,
yeah, I was a bit of a goer. I think I came from a family of self-starters, and it was probably in my blood, in my DNA. So I was always in the place of service. I loved people, I loved socializing, and I loved food, and I still love food today. And after Dominic, my brother, got ill with cancer at 26, and he died at 28 in my arms. Wow. Something changed within me in the way I wanted to be of service. So I began the process of training actually to be a talk therapist. And so I was halfway through that, and then I actually lost my husband in this terrible accident. After that, I decided I would serve people through acupuncture. So I decided that I would train to be an acupuncturist. When I was just about to make my qualifications for that, I was struck down with a brain tumor, and then I ended up paralyzed, and then I had the resulting recovery. Somewhere in between that, Pauline, I found time to try and train to be a naturopathic nutritionist, but my brain wouldn't work. I had a broken brain. And so it's really funny. It's a bit like an emanation. I had this drive, this need to serve people, but it was like, if we want to use the word universe or God, whatever it is, was saying, no, that's not the right one. No, that's not the right one. And so I had to go through all of these challenges. Now I have all of that training behind me, and it helps me and serves me in what I do today. But it wasn't really until I'd come through prescription drug addiction that it completely and utterly made sense. This journey I was on was to understand, to overcome trauma, but also to understand that we need to harness our broken brains. We need to nourish them, feed them, and we need to work on our inner language, our inner world, so that we can truly become emotionally healthy. Because I feel that when we're emotionally healthy, everything else falls into place. And it's as simple as that.
You don't need all the other things to give it to you, the artificial comforts, I suppose. Yeah. Amazing. I mean, just incredible. I didn't even know half of that you had that background. And Rachel, did you spend most of your life in England? Was this happening in the UK, or was this happening in Ireland for you?
No, I'm a bit of a mongrel, Pauline. We came to Ireland on a boat in the 60s. And the idea was my father was going to sail us to New Zealand on this really leaky tub, believe me. So I'm very grateful that he dropped anchor in Glandore and West Cork, and we never went any further. So no, I was schooled in Ireland. But it was kind of interesting because it was the 60s in Ireland, and we were a very British family. moving into Ireland when there were troubles. So it was a very difficult time, I think, to integrate. So I became very English at home and I became very Irish out and about. And then I lived in England for many years, and I lived in Italy for some time. And so I think I've always been a traveler and a journeyer anyway. And there came a time actually when I had to decide, what is your accent going to be? What is your natural voice? Because I was speaking with a French accent here. I was doing, you know, an Italian one over here, and I was doing an Irish one here. And so I felt a bit of my growing up when I said, okay, right, this is how you naturally speak. You don't need to blend with everybody. You don't need to be all things to all men. Just be yourself, be Rachel. So I adopted my home family accent as a kind of my maturing process, to be honest, and just honored that.
No, it's very interesting though. I mean, I really love what you're saying. I mean, I mean, I think if you're a little bit musical, I mean, I can take up an accent so incredibly easy, but then I like languages. So I can easily get in, and then of course I will joke. It's very easy to put on the Italian, French, etc. accents, but it's an identity thing in relation to, and also a really powerful thing to know who you are, and your voice is everything. I mean, how you communicate, you know, so that you are really in alignment, isn't it? It's really a very grounding thing to own your voice and your accent and your culture and your history. Do you agree?
I absolutely agree. And, you know, isn't that part of being a teenager? You know, we want to be this person, we want to be that. And there came a time for me where I had to drop the bullshit, and I had to drop all the trappings that weren't serving me, because believe me, there was a lot more to deal with than worrying about these origins. And the thing is that since I've owned my accent and since I've owned who I am, I found it a lot more simple in other areas of my life, because I'm not using 5 eyes to look around and see, am I okay? Am I good enough? I'm just saying, okay, this is what I'm presenting now, and it feels okay. You know, it feels fine.
You know, I can recall when I was in school too, if somebody came to school, joined the school halfway through the term, or when a new term began, and they had got a different accent because they came from Canada, as did happen in my school. I became quite friendly with the Canadian lady. But equally, you know, somebody coming over from England as well, like sometimes you're intrigued, but then of course there's always going to be the bit of bullying too, you know, because you're different.
Of course.
You know, but I mean, well done. You have certainly blended in, but at the same time, you stand out, which is how you're supposed to be as yourself, Rachel. And this is what I encourage everybody to be. We're born to stand out. You know, it's amazing. We just all have to start building ourselves up and getting comfortable in our own skin and owning our place in the world, that we are definitely good enough. So tell me this, what would be your biggest mistake, and what did you learn from it?
Ooh, we've probably just covered it. I think my biggest mistake, Pauline, was not trusting that who I was designed as, you know, this whole persona was all right. I always wanted to be somebody else. I always wanted to be Pauline Rohdich. I always wanted to be so-and-so. And the thing is as well, I never accepted my body as being something that was beautiful. I always wanted somebody else's body. And I think that was my biggest mistake. Of course, it was a learning from childhood. And of course, my biggest mistake was handing my beauty over to a magazine or whatever it was, and wishing I was other than this, you know, bit, warts and all, you know.
I think every woman can identify with that quite honestly. I mean,
I feel really strongly about that.
Yeah. Well, I remember growing up, and I mean, we're similar vintage. It was Helena Christensen, and all the stunning supermodels of the day were really what was in our face. This perfection. I didn't know there was such a thing as airbrushing. To me, they were just completely perfect. There wasn't a flaw. You know, of course, we've come to learn that that was not the case. And thanks be to God, we're actually showing real women out there now. On the catwalks, in the magazines, and I think that's what it's called for, you know, but that's a whole different story. In relation to, you know, your connection with your higher self, God, universe, I mean, first of all, when do you feel that you have that connection? And, you know, has it always been there for you? Is it something that's kind of arrived, shall we say, in more recent years?
Interesting. It's taken me a very, very long time to actually feel any form of connection. PTSD and trauma completely knock that out of you, and really you're in survival mode constantly. So there isn't actually any room for God or the universe when you're in survival mode. And interestingly, I came from a family that completely and utterly was devoid of any form of spiritual belief. My father said there is no God. When you die, that's it. Bam. So I had no belief system to begin with. And in fact, I used to look, this is quite funny because I used to look at nuns and I felt they had something that I didn't have, which is kind of amusing for me right now, but they did. They had a belief, and I had a hankering after things like hymns at church. We never went to church. But there was something that used to happen in me when I heard these things. And then there was this massive tranche of time between my childhood and, of course, getting to nearly 10 years ago, where I was literally in survival mode every single day. But what started to happen was that I remember the 27th of May, 2013. I remember that was the day I took my last benzodiazepine, which was the drugs I was addicted to. And I remember just something like an inkling inside me. It was just something so small that it would pass it by. But I remember saying, is that what it feels? Is that what it is? And it started to happen more and more and more. And the more I told myself that there was so much more, the more they became. And over a very short period of time, I became really acquainted with people like, Joe Dispenza and Bruce Lipton, all of this. Suddenly it all made sense. Suddenly I had permission to feel connected. Suddenly I had permission to feel the joy of nature. And the thing was, I found my biggest connection comes, funny enough, when I'm hugging a tree. And people might call me a hippie or whatever it is, but actually hugging a tree is one of the most wonderful experiences that I have. So what I can say in essence to your question is nature gives it to me. In every shape or form, it has every answer, and so does the animal kingdom. All of that, I'm up for it.
Listen, I am totally on the same page. I am also a self-confessed tree hugger. I have been, ridiculed for it, but guess what? It's a wonderful thing, and I share it with people. And the more people go out there and hug a tree, the better. It's amazing. It's an amazing experience. Well, we've had different journeys to arrive at where we are, but I am totally with you. I follow you on Instagram. I love your posts in nature. You're totally at home, and you can just see that you're so blended and connected, which is absolutely amazing. And so do you feel that kind of guides you further though in your work and, what you're doing currently and where you're going? I mean, what's next for you? Do you see, I know the book is coming out. Tell us just a little bit about the book and the date that your book is coming out.
Flying on the Inside, I was very lucky to get backing by Amazon. So it's being published on the 1st of December this year. And I've got a little bit of joyous news today, which, funny enough, talking about accents, I've literally just found out that I've been asked to narrate my own book. And isn't that interesting that I've owned my voice, I've owned my accent and owned myself. And that is a natural kind of progression for me. So I was really kind of gratified about that. So the book is all about my story of journey from trauma to recovery. And it's the timeline of my trauma recovery, but it's a very hopeful book. And it's very much a book of I wanted it to be, which is shining a torch down that tunnel for anyone who is still in recovery or going through some traumatic experiences. Because at the time I was going through some of my worst times, internet was only really just starting, and we didn't have people who were inspirational. We didn't have people we looked to and mentors. So I would very much like this book to be a torch in the dark to anyone who is coming through trauma. So look out for it when it comes out.
Rachel, look, I know it's going to be sensational. I know it's going to help a lot of people because you're a living, breathing, wonderful example of what's possible. So, I mean, it's just fantastic. You're real, you're raw, you're here, and you're here to share this message. So, I mean, I'm grateful for you, and I know a lot of other people will be too.
Thank you.
Not at all, Rachel, and the very best of luck with it.
Thank you.
Speaking of books, what book are you reading? Which author are you reading? Who do you like? Who are you enjoying at the moment?
Okay, so I have just given myself a holiday because I'm sure, like you, Pauline, you read constantly around the subject that we work in.
Yes.
And I decided, right, that's enough of it. Summertime, you're going to learn to read novels again. So I'm reading Princess by Jane Shelton at the moment. It's a story of a Saudi princess and the story of women. It's a memoir, and it's about women and how they live in these wonderfully rich countries, and they have no rights, they have absolutely no physical freedom, no emotional freedom, and they are controlled by men. So I'm in awe of this book, and I'm also quite horrified by it, but it's enthralling. It really is.
So when did that come out, that book? I seem to remember something about it. When was that actually published?
I don't know. Now you've asked me a trick question there. I didn't look. I'm reading it at the moment. I think it's fairly recent, and it's a New York Times bestseller. It is a wonderful book, I think, for all women, well, all men and all women to read, but it shows how lucky we are to live in the place we live and to be the women with the freedom we have. Look at us, we've got our arms showing and we've got our décalage and all of this. These women are covered from head to toe, and their only outlet is actually to sit with other women, and they have no choice of whether they're married or not, who they marry, who they choose as a partner. They are chatterings.
Oh, absolutely. You know, and I must admit, I've been out to Saudi and various places in the Middle East when I worked for British Airways myself. So I saw, and we had to put on the abaya, as it was called back then.
Did you?
Yes, we had to cover up, and there was all those restrictions on us in public. We weren't allowed to stand next to any of our male colleagues in public. In fact, you were imprisoned when you got there, because, especially Saudi, because you weren't allowed even into the lobby. So it was room service. It was really unbelievable. But you mentioned the word rich, and I mean, rich maybe in terms of wealth, but certainly that's not a rich life in my book.
No.
And, you know, please God, that will change with the likes of more Malalas coming out and helping to have a voice for such women. So your favorite quote and why?
Oh, my favorite quote. It's very easy and it never changes. The human spirit is stronger than anything that can happen to it. Somebody put that on my fridge in handwriting in about 2011, when I really was struggling with staying alive. And I have it everywhere. I plaster it all over the place because it's true. Our spirit is phenomenal. We were built to be strong. We are strong. And it gives us that trust that actually our DNA is wired to staying alive, and it takes a lot to override it. So I think we can celebrate that as humans, that really we do have a huge core in us. And no matter what happens to you, your spirit is unchanged. Deep down inside, you're unchanged, you're unflawed, you're perfection. You're just a creation of nature.
You're speaking my language, Rachel, completely. And just having the will to live and the will to improve and the will to live a better life every single day is available to every single person. Every single person. We just need to give ourselves the permission. So who would you love, Rachel, to sit down with, have a lovely dinner with? Somebody that, you know, you're really inspired by, and that can be alive or they can be past. Who would it be if you had the chance?
I think it would have to be my ancestors. I think I'd have to sit down with my ancestors, because there are so many unanswered questions that I would love answers to. So I don't know if I can say I'd be inspired by them, I'm not sure, but I would love to sit down with my paternal grandmother. Wow. I would love to sit down with my maternal grandmother, and to be able to speak to those women and hear their stories and understand some of the patterns and legacies that have come down through my family. So I hope I'd be inspired by them, but I certainly would I think that I would be illuminated by talking to women from the ages that have come through in the patterns of our family. I'd like that.
No, that's wonderful, actually. And nobody's ever said that to me before. Interesting. Very, very interesting. So what excites you most about the future, Rachel?
The future is what I write it to be. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what excites me the most, is I appeared to be in a pattern of many negative things coming towards me, and they couldn't be anything but I learned from them. But now I realize that I've changed the patterns, I believe, in my life. So now I realize it's anything I populate it with. And that's what excites me, because it is my responsibility, I believe, to seek the joy every day. It's my responsibility to stay as healthy as I can, and so on. So I'm excited about what I can actually create and bring into my life. And I think that that is the freedom of really being free, isn't it? Being able to see that.
Very much so. And when you describe that contrast of other women in this world currently who don't have that freedom, I mean,
sure,
there is absolutely so much that we can do. Well, Rachel, it's just been an absolute pleasure having you on this episode. And would you have any kind of words of wisdom for anybody out there who's listening that perhaps, you know, maybe are going through trauma, or as a lot of women who listen to this show tend to be either aspiring entrepreneurs or are already entrepreneurs on their journey? Any words of wisdom?
Gosh, words of wisdom. I'm not sure if I'm very wise, but what I would say for my own journey is that everything takes time, and everything is a step-by-step approach. Everything comes in layers. So just keep your eyes close on the road below you and have one eye on the vision that you need. That will get you through pretty much anything. It's when we try and rush through our problems or rush to the end, the destination, that we come a cropper. We must live within the journey. Find something to live with, no matter how difficult it is. There will be one jewel that you can actually find a little bit of meaning and a little bit of purpose while you are trying to get over there. But over there, you'll have another horizon after it. So it's about living now, no matter how difficult it is, really.
And that it is, again, just possible to get to the other side, for sure. Well, Rachel, look at it, as I said, it's a joy to talk to you, and I wish you every success with your upcoming book and all that it will bring to you and to other people that have the pleasure of getting to know you through your book and beyond. So thank you again.
Thank you, Pauline.
Wonderful. So thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of On a Mission. And if you are a woman on a mission too, I'd love to hear from you. You're very welcome to join us and be a guest on the show. And for now, have a wonderful day in the world, wherever you are. And remember, you have more power than you realize. Lots of love. Take care. And namaste. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this show so that you will be notified when the next episode is released. And remember, keep believing you're amazing and you have so much to give. Now is your time.